Hey guys, George from SoundTraxx here, and this week on Board with SoundTraxx, we're going to talk about passenger trains. So first, let's just talk about how passengers ran in the era of steam. Of course, the steam locomotive generated steam, and that steam pressure was used for traction on the locomotive. But the heat that steam uses was also now used to heat the passenger cars behind it. The railroads ran a steam line from the locomotive through the entire train line, and each of these cars was equipped with a radiator that steam heat would then flow into and then warm the car. Towards the end of the car, they actually left the valve for that steam line open just a little bit to maintain steam pressure flow all the way through the entire train to make sure that the guys in the last cars were still getting warmth as well. Now, as the railroads transitioned to diesels operate a lot differently by generating electricity. So with this steam heat, they needed a way to be able to heat the cars. So in the interim, they implemented what's called a steam generator. Let's talk about that now. So as the railroads transitioned into diesels, the diesels were using diesel engines to generate electricity to run the traction motors. So the steam that was used for traction is gone. And so with all this passenger fleet that operated on steam heat, the railroads needed a way to generate that steam. And so on the back of most of the passenger-equipped locomotives, they had what was called a steam generator. And that steam generator sits right here on the back of these two locomotives, and it was there to help generate that steam heat that was necessary for the passenger cars. Now, as the years progressed, the cars were transitioned to electric heat, but in the very beginning, of course, they had to be steam. Now, to show you the steam generator, I've taken our E7 here and I've put it on the track and I've hooked it up to our passenger train. Now, if you're a purist out there, don't worry about the road name on the cars. This is just a prop. Now, what I've done to this is I've taken the prime mover volume and set it down quite a bit, and I've taken the other sounds and turned the volume down, and I've taken the sound of that steam generator and I've turned it up a little bit so that you guys can really hear the sound effect. Now, this is on all of our Tsunami2 decoders as function 20 by default. When you activate function 20, you'll hear the sound of the steam generator. So to let you hear that, let's do that now. Now, as you can know, the sound has been exaggerated here for this video clip. You can adjust the volume to your own personal taste, as we've discussed in a previous video. Now let's talk about another aspect of passenger train operations, and that's head-end power. As locomotives progressed and diesels became more and more predominant, the railroads realized that steam heat wasn't the most effective way to operate their trains, and so they started converting their passenger equipment over to electrical operations. Now, electrical operations in your train was used for things like lighting, heating, kitchen equipment, air conditioning units. All of that was run off of electricity. So as the railroads progressed, they went into head-end power. Now, head-end power used the locomotive to generate electricity, not just to power the traction on the locomotive, but also to power the passenger train equipment behind. So with that, the F40PH was one of the first head-end power locomotives. So let's take a look at it right now. So in your Tsunami2, function 16 enables head-end power. Head-end power in this EMD F40PH artificially notched the prime mover up to notch 8. And the idea was that the main generator was now generating enough electrical energy to power the traction motors as well as the passenger cars behind. So to do this, we're going to enable function 16. You're going to hear the alarm bell, and now you're going to hear the prime mover go up to notch 8 as it enters head-end power mode. Now, head-end power mode is enabled irrespective of the speed. So when the locomotive is sitting, the head-end power was running. These locomotives were nicknamed Little Screamers because of the amount of noise that they created when they were sitting still at the depot. So now once we're in head-end power mode, we're ready to go. And we move on our way. So now let's take a look at head-end power on this GE P42. As technology progressed with head-end power, GE realized that they didn't have to run at notch 8, and this way they were able to consume less fuel when it was in head-end power mode. So the GE locomotives will actually go to notch 6. and it will maintain in head-end power in notch 6. Now, the really cool feature is our dynamic digital exhaust in the Tsunami 2 will allow the prime mover to notch up as needed and back down to 6, but never drop below notch 6 as the locomotive is running across the layout. So let's take a look at that. Now once this is settled into head-end power, we're ready to go. We've got our passenger train powered up. We're going to go ahead and get moving. Now you didn't hear the prime mover notch up because it's already moving. So now I'm going to put a little resistance on the wheels to simulate and as I release, you'll hear it drop back down to 6. But now it stays in 6 the whole time. That's how head-end power works on the Tsunami 2. So what we've done is in CB112, we've set a bit to enable the steam generator or the HEP pup motor. So by setting this to the on position to enable the pup motor, you will now take function 20, and instead of turning on the steam generator like we showed you earlier, you will actually enable the HEP pup motor, the secondary generator. So what we're going to do now with this F59 PHI, we've got it set up for the EMD 710, and I have already turned the volume levels down for the prime mover so that you can hear this effect better. Now by enabling function 20, we will hear the HEP generator turn on. And that will run the duration of your run as long as function 20 is enabled. And then to simply turn it off, you turn off function 20 again. And it shuts down. We've talked a lot about passenger train operation today. Now, we will be talking more in depth about passenger operations for push-pull operation, like the trains you see here in front of me for commuter service. We'll talk about that with SoundTraxx coming up in a future video, so be sure to subscribe and like below.